Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome all of you also in the name of the organizing institution, MCC Brussels. As I understand it correctly, their goal is somehow to try to colonize Brussels, at least in the field of ideas. I don't know how successful they are, but this conference looks to be very successful. So thank you very much for having me. We have here very distinguished scholars and philosophers, and I'm a politician, so I will rather focus on the political consequences of this debate and discussion. And I just want to very briefly mention you 5 points, what I put together for today and after hearing these introductory remarks. First of all, we Hungarians, we are not the colonizers, but the country which was many times tried to be colonized, but also we are in the middle of Europe, not an isolated country, surrounded by neighbors, surrounded by different countries. So we do have an experience how to live together and how to manage life with the neighbors, and also how to mismanage relationships, not just among people, but among nations, and how horrifying consequences it could have. The second one, related to the first one, is that for us Hungarians, one thing is sure, or at least it wasn't questioned until now, not even by leftist thinkers. So that we Hungarians are part of an ancient nation. So it's an old nation. So according to our understanding and belief, the idea of nation, it's not a new concept. It's not a modern concept. It's not an invention of the French Revolution. It's something else. When the Hungarian tribes came together 1,500 years ago, somewhere in an East Asian plains, they decided to share blood in a ritual way, and they decided to act together and to remain together and to work together. And this wasn't based on color. This wasn't based on race. This wasn't based even on language, although now the Hungarian language, which is a secret code among us, it's obviously part of our identity, but that wasn't the case before 1,500 years ago. So it's not about race, it's not about the color, it's not about the language, but it's about a common goal. It was this sharing of blood, this ritual was about to accepting a common goal, a common purpose for the Hungarian tribes, that they decided that they are stronger together than alone, and they wanted to have a new home, and they are ready to conquer, they are ready to fight for each other together, they're ready to conquer together, ready to fight for each other, and ready to establish a state, which was a successful project after 400 and 500 years ago. So what we learned from that historical experience is that it's critical to have a common purpose for the nation. It's critical for national survival to have a common goal, which has to be per definitionem based on something mutual, a mutual history, mutual value system, mutual way of life, way of understanding. If there is no mutual understanding of history, if there is no mutual understanding on how we should live our life, then how can it be a chance to have a common goal for the future? It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So I understand that there are some other intellectual frameworks which are saying that nation is a modern concept and probably probably we should get rid of the old type of understanding of patriotism, or some people even dare to use the word nationalism, which I'm not doing, but anyhow, without a common purpose of the nation, how anybody wants to be and can possibly think that they could be successful in the 21st century. And the common purpose of a nation can only be based on history and common values and identity. The third point, or it's probably the B part of the second takeaway of mine, is like example. Again, as it was mentioned by Professor Bragg. So history can also give you examples how to deal contemporary challenges, which are completely unknown for living generations. And this is what we Hungarians experienced in 2015 when we had the migration crisis. When that was the first time it was an unknown experience for the Hungarians living now in the territory of Hungary, that from one day to another, 400,000 people coming from different parts of the world, trying to march across our country. And how to respond to that? And the only direction you can turn to is history. And when we started to talk about Hungarian history, we immediately realized, even among people from the political elite, that we have a historical understanding of this thing. In the medieval period of time, the Hungarian kingdom, the idea of Hungarian kingdom and the identity of the Hungarian kingdom was based on the fact that we were the last frontiers of Christianity against the Ottomans. And it's decoded somehow in ourselves, that if the history repeats itself, then we also have to repeat our behavior if it fits our identity. This is why we immediately realize that, oh, this is not a short-term humanitarian crisis. Obviously, those people are from a humanitarian point of view in need, but this is a mass migration. This is a kind of occupation, new type of occupation of the 21st century. So we have to react in a very similar way, that defend our way of life, defend our borders, and restore law and order. And history could teach us many, many things. How they came, how they behaved, how they pretended that this is not about changing the culture of a hosting nation, it's about just seeking for refuge. And how it changed after years and after decades. How the West, so-called West, betrayed Hungary, as it happened in the medieval period of time. They were not coming to help us because they played their nasty political games. And they were partly satisfied that the Hungarian kingdom is finally occupied by the Ottomans. History repeats itself, and if we want to build up a successful, effective strategy, political strategy, which fits for this changing reality of the 21st century, it should come from our historical experiences. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And probably, but I will be very modest on that, probably this is the reason, this lack of understanding why the Western powers and some Western countries reacted on the issue of migration differently, because they didn't realize that there is a historical pattern, or their historical experience was different, and it didn't help them to realize in what situation we are now. My third point, Brussels and the mainstream mindset of Brussels. We are next to the building of European history. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the exhibition, but it's worth to see. Not because you can agree with what is there, but because you will realize that there is an ongoing project of destroying European national history and substituting it to some common European history, but without recognizing that it is based on different European nations and their national history. This is the trick. What the exhibition is mainly about, and I think it's a very dangerous trend, and I tell you why. Because the European Union, I think it's a very smart initiative. It's a very good initiative, but it's not a simple one. It's a complicated political structure. Why? Because now we have 27 member states, but everybody is talking about that there can be the time when we will have 30 or 35 member states. And we are working together in at least 30 different policy areas. Never ever in the history of the European continent was such a thing, that 27 nation states were working together in more than 30 policy areas. Never ever was this the case. And in this very fragile situation, the only thing which makes it possible to maintain the efficiency and also the level of cooperation is that if we understand each other, if we understand each other's history. If we don't understand each other, we just want to, smash each other, then the entire project can be blown up. What I'm trying to explain to my students that I'm a Hungarian. I really love the country Portugal. I don't know if there is anybody from Portugal, but I do love Portuguese people. They have very good food, wonderful culture, wonderful people. If you want to have the best holiday in your life, go and come and visit Portugal. But first Hungary. This is the problem if you are a patriot. Even if you try to please somebody else, you end up pleasing yourself, your country. So everybody should definitely visit Portugal. But I scanned through the Hungarian and the Portuguese history. I did some research a couple of years ago, and I tried to identify the mutual points in the Portuguese history and in the Hungarian history. So what do we Hungarians know, but not just from the textbooks, but by instinct, about Portugal, and what Portuguese people do know about Hungary? And honestly, I realized that there's almost nothing. Why? Because we are far away from each other. It's the same continent, but a completely different part of the world. And now, on a European level, the Hungarian government votes in the council, and Hungarian MPs also, they voting in the European Parliament. And if the law passes, then this law will affect the everyday life of the Portuguese people. And what the Portuguese government is voting for, it will affect the everyday life of the Hungarian people, whom have no idea about each other, but they have an effect on each other. And that's a very, very fragile situation. So it's like you have to put a lot of energy into working together, understanding each other's position, respecting each other's difficulties and differences, understanding each other's history. If there is a structure which is built on canceling each other's history and building a new type of history, then it's going to be very complicated. So if the Brussels elite is not giving up the cancel culture, there is a possibility that they risk the future and the survival of the European project. The fourth point, and I will be very brief at that point. So, post-colonial world and the global south. So I think everybody has to acknowledge that the world itself changed. The equilibrium of power and the balance of power, it's changed dramatically. The West is still powerful. Unfortunately, the American part of the West is more powerful than the European part, but the West is still powerful. But it's also true that other civilizations are coming up, and they are becoming also more and more powerful, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, whether we agree with it or not, whether we justify it or not. This is the fact, this is the reality. And honestly, they are very honest with us, because we are Central Europeans, we never try to colonize them. So they are very outspoken with us about the post-colonial world. And they are fed up with the moral superiority of the West. They are laughing on the failures of the Western countries, and they are fed up liberal elites of the Western countries still trying to lecture them. Although they have their population, which means they have their internal market, which means they have their economic growth. They have other partners. They have their own countries. They have their own nations. They have their own languages. They have their own civilizational backbone. They think that they are going to be the winners of the 21st century. We don't have to accept their way of understanding, but if we want to cooperate with them, we have to understand that their mindset is like this. And I think, as a Central European, that we Europeans should be able to cooperate with them, keep up the cooperation in a peaceful, economically, mutually beneficiary way. And for this, we have to get rid of cancel culture, get rid of the liberal moral superiority, and try to take them seriously, and try to engage with them, to not just winning the past, but winning the future. And the last point, education. Education is the key. Liberals, at least in Hungary, dislike the idea of mine about that, but I'm convinced that education in general, it's a conservative thing. Why? Because education is about that there is an amount of knowledge which was put together by the previous generations, and what is the role of education? To transfer this piece of knowledge to the next generation, that they don't have to start again everything. So I think this is the most conservative way of thinking, that you have something from the past and you transfer it for the next generation that helps them to be more successful, more efficient, and more happy, probably, if I may use this word. So I think that education, we have to win the battle over education. It means that all those ideologies which are trying to destroy our history are very dangerous one, and we have to be able, it doesn't matter which political party or political platform we support, but we have to be able to fight back, defend our past, defend our structure, general and basic structure of education, for the sake of winning the future. And I hope this is exactly what is done in Hungary, not alone, but also by MCC. Thank you very much.